Hi, I'm Alison Lebovitz, and I live in Chattanooga, Tennessee. My husband and I have three teenage boys, Arthur, Abe, and Levi. I am a proud Jewish woman, and our family is very committed to our faith. I'm also a very proud entrepreneur. That's kind of a great catchphrase for anyone who wears a lot of hats and has cobbled together several things professionally in order to create her full life. So, in no particular order, I am fortunate enough to host a television show for our local PBS station called The A-List with Alison Lebovitz, and that's a weekly show on WTCI PBS. I also run a nonprofit called One Clip at a Time that is aligned with the Paperclips Project in Whitwell, Tennessee, and we use the documentary that was done on that project to help inspire service learning and student activism in classrooms across North America. I also host a podcast, a weekly half-hour podcast with my sister, Amanda, and that podcast is called Sis and Tell, a little play on Kiss and Tell. And then finally, I'm also a professional speaker, and I typically, when it's not COVID, of course, travel across North America to deliver motivational talks to all sorts of groups, but a lot of them happen to be women in business, women entrepreneurs, and women philanthropists. I think it's important that women have the confidence and opportunity to own their own businesses. But in that same vein, I also feel it's critical that women feel confident and have the opportunity to do whatever it is in life that they most want, right? And owning their own business may not be for everyone, right? If success for a woman lies in corporate America or the volunteer world, if it lies in owning her own agency or running her own household, I think a woman's obligation is to herself, right? And to the people she loves and to the family she may have. It's to feeling like she is successful personally and professionally, and to define that in whatever capacity feels like it has meaning and value to her. I think the worst thing we can do, especially as women, is let others define what success looks like for us. I think as soon as we figure out what success looks like in our own eyes and for our own selves, that's when we really achieve happiness. For any woman thinking of starting her own business, I will say what I often tell our three boys, which is don't let perfect be the enemy of great. And by that, I mean, if you spend all of your energy and all of your time trying to figure out the perfect path, right? Because starting anything, right, a business included, is a daunting and sometimes very scary proposition. So if you spend all of your time trying to perfect that goal, you may never launch it. So just do it, right? Especially with the nonprofit that I run. Ironically, the model that we use for service learning is exactly the model that we use to start the nonprofit. And this is this triangular model that talks about choose, act, and reflect, right? So that you never get paralyzed by one of those. You constantly are in the flow of that sort of, triangular approach to life. So you choose something, you then act on it, and then you reflect and you see what can you do better, what can you do differently, or maybe you chose the wrong thing and you want to choose something different. So I would say anybody who wants to start a business needs to just choose it, act on it, and reflect. And I always say, I always want to be, of course, better today than I was yesterday and better tomorrow than I am today. I think one of the most critical things I have learned is how important it is for women to support, to encourage, to embrace, to affirm other women. I think I've heard it a lot from especially peers and colleagues of mine that they have come into contact with women who are in leadership roles, have made it, right, to a place where they aspire to be, but aren't always encouraging of other women to get in that same place, as if, right, that this is the idea of success is a pie and there's only so many slices that we can dole out. Success is not like that, right? And prosperity is not like that. When other women prosper and succeed, we all prosper and succeed. So I think our opportunity and responsibility to lift and support other women, no matter what they're doing, is critical in equal measure. On International Women's Day, the most important message I want to send out to young women especially is don't let fear ever stop you from pursuing your dreams, right? Don't let the fear of the unknown paralyze you when it comes to pursuing what you think you want to do. And also, I know you've probably heard this before, but it's great to make mistakes, right? Failure, I know nobody wants to fail, but I like to make the analogy of when I drive into a new city. I'm a great driver, I really am, but I have a terrible sense of geography. And so I get lost a lot, especially if I'm in a place that I'm not familiar with. The beauty of getting lost is that once I go the wrong way or down the wrong street, I know that's the wrong way and never to go there again. That's the same with business and failure, right? Once you try something and it may not be for you, or you may fail miserably, at least you've learned a very valuable lesson, which is not to go down that pathway. And knowing where not to go, I promise, is just as valuable as knowing what direction you want to be going in. So don't let fear stop you. Don't be afraid to take a route, even if it may be the wrong one, and let failure guide you as you build the road to success. Diversity and this idea of inclusivity and equity has played a huge role in both my personal and professional life. When I really look at the common theme to anything I have done, and that includes not only the interview show that I do for PBS, it includes the speeches I give, it includes really primarily the nonprofit I run, and I balance that with the nonprofit work that I do, the nonprofit boards that I've sat on, the nonprofits I've been aligned with. There is really a common thread, and it is this idea of justice, right? And justice is this umbrella term that we use for things like equality, equity, inclusivity, and embracing and affirming others who may be different from us. With One Clip at a Time, the nonprofit that I run, we are all about sharing those lessons and making sure that especially our next generation, right, our students, understand what it means to have a diverse array of friends and colleagues. They understand what it means to maybe not pray the same as everybody in the room with you, right? Or vote the same or think the same. I never want to be in the same room with people who all think and pray and vote the same as I do, but I want to learn from others. I want to learn how to embrace other people's differences in order to better understand the world around me. That's what we do with One Clip. We're trying to build a more understanding, a more embracing, a more accepting society. For a long time, you heard the word tolerance, right? That to build a more tolerant society was a goal for many of us in this field. We don't use that word anymore because basically the root word of tolerance is tolerate. I don't want anybody just to tolerate me. Someone once said the only thing someone should be willing or have to tolerate is lactose, right? So tolerance, we understand intolerance, right? And I have a huge intolerance for people who are intolerant. But when it comes to the flip side of that, what we're really trying to do is not just build a tolerant society. We're trying to build a more inclusive, a kinder, a gentler, a more embracing, a more understanding, a more educated society that realizes our differences are what makes us so beautiful. As individuals, I definitely think the best thing we can do is have a conversation every day, or let's even say every week, right? Once a year, pick a one, right? Pick one time to do this where you have a conversation with somebody who's not like you, right? I'm actually part of a women's group, and we discussed this year specifically this idea of intentional and active listening. And especially in such a polarized political environment that this year has been, how important it was, how critically important, more than ever, to to really listen to the people around us, those who we were friends with and those who maybe we're just friendly with. And so we all had a charge. We all had to go and find somebody to have a conversation with who thought differently than we did about an important topic. And I will tell you, I thought this was going to be easy, right? I'm a fairly liberal thinker living in a fairly conservative part of the United States. And so I am certain that I can literally find people all around me who think differently than I do. But actually engaging in that conversation, I realized was much scarier than I had ever thought, right? Especially for me, right? I think I stated earlier, I don't really have a filter. I'm not really afraid to talk my mind. But the idea of really talking to someone on a subject that could be emotional for both of us felt very intimidating. But I did. I found a friend of mine. We had a really respectful conversation about something I didn't even realize that we disagreed on. And we both left the conversation feeling really good about it and feeling really heard and really valued. And it was a great lesson to me, because as open-minded as I hope I can be and as inclusive as I intend to be, I realized that intentionality has to be really processed and activated every day. And by having those conversations with people who are different than I am is just a really important way of understanding and learning every day to further embrace and affirm the world around me. Sometimes I feel like the world is at a turning point, right? They used to say that even though we are more connected than we've ever been before, we are less connected than we've ever been, right? Like, even though we're allowed to and have the access to technology, it doesn't necessarily connect us. I definitely think the pandemic changed that, because everyone was basically forced to be on a device in order to connect with people who might have been around the world, but for the most part could have been just down the street. People who we were used to jumping in our car to meet for a meeting or jumping to meet for lunch, right? Like there has been no jumping, right? There has been no meeting. All of our connectivity has been through Zoom, right? Case in point, this interview itself. But I do think, maybe the better word is, I do hope that our world is at a turning point, because the connectivity has also allowed us to see that no matter where we live, we're just a small part of a global population and a global peoplehood that is so rich in different histories, different faiths, different traditions and colors, and ways of life. For me, when I see the sort of, and my mom always said, it's not a melting pot, right? A melting pot assumes that everything goes into the stew and gets mixed together into one color. But she would call it a stew, right? When I see the giant stew that the world is, because that's the way that we can see the potatoes and the carrots and the onions and everything so individualized, right? That's what creates this beautiful world around us. Are we at a turning point? I hope we are. So being kind to others is a huge part of not only my life, but a huge asset that my husband and I have tried to bestow onto our children, right? Because there's a lot that we can do for our kids, right? A lot that we can teach them. The one thing we can't do for them is to be kind to others, right? The one thing I can't do for my kid is to be generous to others. I can hopefully, pass on those traits and teach them how critical that is, but just like it's incumbent upon me to figure out how to be kind, how to be generous. Our children, our neighbors, our friends, our family, our peers have to learn that for themselves. But kindness is really such an easy thing to do that creates a ripple effect for the world to feel. Just as people are doing intentional acts of violence across the world, if we could mirror those acts of violence or hate or intolerance with 10 times, 1,000 times as many intentional acts of kindness, then we could build this ladder of kindness up to a world that would be more embracing and more loving. And I truly believe that one small act of kindness a day is the first step in building that kinder, more equitable, more loving and embracing world. I am so grateful for the work that the Hunter Memorial Mural is doing, right? This is all about global recovery of hope and the belief in good. And I will tell you, I do know that hope is the strongest thing we have. It's stronger than fear. It's stronger than sadness. Hope is the one beacon of light that we all can share for this world. Because we are one world, one voice, and this is the art of being kind. Thank you so much.